so much for coming. I think people will be coming in and out, and we appreciate you coming this morning. This is always something that I think when we do a special program like this, or project, like the Pellicciati Productions, we want to get people here because we all know how easy it is to get to Potsdam, right? It only takes, 3 planes? And
death in your own hands in a little tiny plane.
And so we wanted to have people here, and when our panelists were so gracious and agreeing to come up, we're not stupid enough to just let them come up and eat and watch a show and drink. We want to get something out of them, and so just after you're drunk, yeah. Whatever.
I went home.
we will. Anyway, so we're just so thrilled to have you all here, and what I'd love to do is have each of you briefly introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do in the profession, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, I'm Larry Edelson. I'm the founder of American Lyric Theater in New York City. ALT is not a producing opera company. It is a company that mentors composers and librettists and develops new works. ALT is the home to the only full-time program for both composers and librettists in the country, a mentorship program for them to have training opportunities with wonderful working professionals such as Mark Campbell, who is on our faculty, and a number of other illustrious artists, and to develop their skills specifically as operatic writers. What we found before I founded ALT was that there were so many opportunities for young singers, as you all know, young artist programs, but the same sort of opportunities for people who want to write opera didn't exist on the same scale. And so that's why I created ALT. I'm also recently was appointed General Director of Opera Saratoga, and so I'm splitting my time between Saratoga Springs and New York City.
Melissa Wegner, SUNY Potsdam class of 03. Great pride. Now I am the Associate Director of the National Council Auditions at the Metropolitan Opera. I've been in that position for 4 years, and between Potsdam and that, I studied voice, and I really focused a lot on new works, and as a performer and just as an avid fan, that's really where my heart was. And after that I worked at New York City Opera doing super titles, and really got into traditional opera through super titles. And now I do a combination of both. I still am working in the super titling field, but also full-time with the Met, nurturing the next generation of artists.
I'm Darren Woods, General Director of Fort Worth Opera. After 18 years of superstardom as a singer, I decided to go into management. And often I say, you used to fly around the world singing and people paid you. What was so wrong with your life that you would want to change so drastically? But actually, really, what changing to management did for me was I had always had a passion for young artists and mentoring young singers, and always had a passion for new music. I was in Carlisle Floyd's Willie Stark when I was 19 at Houston Grand Opera. So when the mentoring of young singers sort of naturally morphed into composers and librettists and doing new work, and I'm really proud to say that 50% of Fort Worth Opera's repertoire is new work, and for a small regional company, that is enormous. And I think that part of the things that people are having more and more courage of doing new work is that we 10, 12 years ago started doing this, and people watched us through the recession not have debt and not have deficit and have record audiences when everybody else retreated to Bohème, and we weren't doing that. So new work is just so important, and it's just a huge part of my DNA.
I'm Laura Lee Everett. I'm the Director of Artistic Services for Opera America. Opera America is the national service organization for opera in North America. We have over 150 member representative professional companies in the United States and in Canada, as well as a handful of member companies from the Pacific Rim area. I've been in this position for 2.5 years, and I deal with all things that relate to artists, from technical production personnel, singer training, and in particular a large focus is new work, commissioning, working with composers and librettists, and re-granting programs that we manage for different composer and new repertoire development funding. Prior to that, I had an illustrious career flying around the country as a very glamorous stage manager in the arts. Trained as a singer and a musician from a very early age, I sort of knew I wanted to do something with opera and got very involved in the administrative side of it early on and enjoyed being that part of the creative process. And as a trained musician, which not all stage managers were, was handed a great number of new works, obscure works. I didn't do Bohème until I'd been in the business for 10 years, but I'd done Fidelio 3 times by that point. And I really had a great passion both for new work and for working with young artists. I was in Aspen for 10 seasons as an administrator there, where we started a new work development initiative and premiered pieces and workshopped everything from Bright Shang's composition Song of Mine into working with Thomas Addis and working with Carlisle Floyd and Lee Hoybe. And then went to the University of Maryland, where I got to work with some really fantastic composers and librettists like Mark Campbell, and premiered another collection of pieces treating, at a major research institution, new opera as the closest thing that we can equate in the performing arts research as we develop stories going forward.
Hi, I'm Copeland Woodruff. I'm a small Alabama farm boy who went to the big city by a long route, much very similar to the other people here. I ended up at New York City Opera, and I saw my colleagues and worked with them, my singing colleagues, and saw they were having troubles, or they had to craft their acting chops on the job and didn't have the training that you have with Carleen. It's a rare find, you will find. It's better now. But I got out of the business after being in it and went back to academia so that I could help nurture actors and an acting training program and a synthesis with music and with movement and with truth in acting and with different acting styles, seeing the emergence of HD broadcasts and having a camera in your face, and how is that different now? And I ended up with some lovely groups, Guerrilla Opera in Boston, who are changing the face of how we think about opera and how we think about ensemble and how we think about opera companies and entrepreneurship. And I want to thank Carleen for having me here.
So what we'll do is I'm hoping that this will be a conversation, and so we will also ask for questions, or if you have a question or want to contribute. We are live streaming, so we'll just need to make sure everything gets in the microphone so that it's heard. But I just wanted to sort of talk to you about sort of where my head was in putting this together a little bit, and we can certainly go from there. There's a wonderful article, or a chapter in Jim Collins's book called High Pop, Making Culture into Popular Entertainment. And the chapter is by John Story, and it's called Expecting Rain, Opera as Popular Culture. And it was really thought-provoking, and when I was going through researching other papers and blogs and whatnot, I ran across Larry. Larry has some great writings on his blog that I was delighted to see this referenced. And so it kind of brought me back full circle into this. And he talks, he quotes Raymond Williams in his article, and he talks about his defining culture. It says, it can be one of many things, but these are sort of the 3 things that stood out to me. Culture as a general process of intellectual, spiritual, and aesthetic development. Culture as a particular way of life for people, a period of time, or a group. Or culture as the works and practices of an intellectual or artistic activity. And I think that obviously the third one, makes sense, but I think of all of these is very relevant to what we do in opera. And then he defines popular culture as well-liked by many people, inferior kinds of work deliberately setting out to win favor with people, or culture actually made by people for themselves. which I thought was very interesting as well. And so those were sort of the things that I've been noodling on as we were, thinking about what we might talk about today. And it occurs to me with new works in particular, making them relevant. To me, if they're being created, there is relevance. If they're going to have legs, there's already relevance in there. So my question to talk about first is, if opera as high culture, as we think of it, or it has been tagged, is viewed separately from popular culture, how do we affirm its relevance in the context of higher education? When our students are weaned on Disney or commercial musical theater, not that there's anything wrong with that.
Frozen.
What was the girl in Frozen? What's her name?
Elsa.
Elsa, yes, you all know. There's like 25 Elsas at my door for Halloween. It was great. And so, when our students are weaned on Disney and commercial musical theater, what are ways that we might absorb and present American opera so that they may be more inclined to creatively explore it both as musician and consumer? I know it's a broad question. It's intentionally that way. So, Larry, you want to address it? I would.
Well, I think that the question has part of the problem in it, and that is that we call opera high culture.
Yeah.
And I think that's the very first thing we have to stop, is that opera wasn't always high culture, highbrow. It's something that, in the United States in particular, it didn't become this way. We made it this way. In the 19th century, we took opera, we put it in opera houses. There was a code of behavior that was designed. We had to get dressed up like this or nicer to go to the opera. We would never do opera in the language that we understood, because that would be, that's for those common people, And so we, as a society in the States, we did a lot of things to make opera not popular culture when the form itself had been, from its original form, a pop culture form. If you think about the first operas and the subject matter of the first operas, they were based on the stories of the Oresteia, which at that time was pop culture. No, it's not pop culture to us now, of course, but these were stories that were relevant, that people already knew the stories. They were operas that were in the language of the people, in a musical style that was embraced. And so I think that as long as we define opera as high culture, as long as we do things as opera companies and schools that try to put it on a pedestal, we're never going to have any success.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, if you look at Nabucco and Va Pensiero, everybody in that audience knew that was about Italian liberation. It was a brand new piece. They knew what the composer was trying to say to them, and it was subversive. The Beaumarchais plays were subversive, They were all censored. And so when we now say, well, this new, now we have this, I think as Americans, we were ashamed of our own American voice. And I think that's what's happened in the last decade, certainly, with Opera America's help, is that we've become really proud of our voice and really proud of American music theater. And I think in the next decade, that's even going to blend more and more, where our voice is going to be our preferred voice. And it will be pop culture again, I hope.
I will say that also contemporarily we're starting to see the demystification of opera by taking it out of the opera house. It is a slow turn, but we've all become aware of the fact that the generation that's sitting in front of us, or the millennial generation, is much more interested in investing their entertainment dollars, whether high culture, low culture, or somewhere in between, in an experience. They want to have an experience rather than go buy material goods. The statistics on that have been off the chart as they've measured them in the last 10 years. And there are opera companies around the country that, at the moment, are taking opera out of the opera house. We don't have a way to quantify that 30,000 person audience that dresses up because they can to go see the broadcast of The Barber of Seville from the Dallas Opera to Cowboy Stadium. But we know they're there. And we need to learn that they're not going to translate to ticket sales in the big house, but that we are starting to reach that audience with stories based on the Beaumarchais play that were relevant then. And how do we take our contemporary pieces and stories to the audience in the same way? We're starting to see pieces that are being done in bars, in found spaces out in the open, in cities, in small towns. And those are the things that are going to change the face of how we communicate our stories to the audiences that will understand that they are our popular culture told through this medium.
I think what is happening here this weekend is exactly what needs to happen to bridge this, is that this is fostering communication between students and composers and industry professionals and all of your families who are able to attend to watch you on stage this weekend. They're going to take a little bit of this back to them, and they're going to know that they've seen an opera, they've seen a contemporary opera, they've met a composer. You know, these are things that people don't really do on a daily basis. We might, because we're immersed in this lifestyle, but I think that just even having those experiences, and also at such a high level, what we were able to see yesterday on stage, and what if you're streaming tonight, you can see from your computer anywhere, is a very, very high level. Nothing has been dumbed down to make this more accessible as an experience. This is a very, very high level experience that everyone is going to be able to draw something from.
Yeah, I have to jump on that bandwagon. I'm constantly confronted with dumbed down marketing plans and dumbed down audience expectation. And I think it's insulting, and I know I'm on camera and live streaming, but I'll just go ahead and say it. I think that there's a way to tell stories to people and leave room for them to have their own story with that. And I think the three that we saw last night left so much generous room for us as an audience to have our own experience with them. And that wasn't just the pieces themselves, it was Carleen and you guys. But we don't need to apologize for it being opera. And it isn't an elitist thing we have, but just like Larry said, we've made it an elitist thing, and I think that we are on the way, and this is certainly a great, great step forward to do such a thing.
Over the last 10 years or so, what has, in your mind, what has been the impact of new works on the opera profession? We could like to talk about it more specifically. What's been the impact of new works on the opera profession? What has prompted such a resurgence of commissions, and in what unique ways has it affected how opera is viewed by the general public?
I have some statistics
Yay.
to share with you.
Our stage manager.
I will tell you that in the early 1980s, general directors from a number of opera companies around the country came together at a meeting that Opera America coordinated to discuss the development of new work, which was a fairly acrimonious and heated meeting and discussion. And so many of the general directors said it's impossible for us to produce new work because there's no funds to workshop it. We can't, there's no way we can develop this, and we can't put anything in front of our audience that's untested, because if it, turns out to be horrible, we'll never recover in the box office. So after some extensive research and a great report that actually was put out about that, funding was put together and sponsored in part of the re-granting that we do at Opera America for a program originally called Opera for the 80s and Beyond, OFF-TM.
We were big in acronyms back then.
Well, we still are. And it morphed through 3 different other awkward acronym phases, and then it became the Opera Fund, with many thanks to the Lila Wallace Reader's Digest Fund, as well as the Ford Foundation and the Mellon Foundation, and several other foundations that support it. In the 25 years since the creation of what is now the Opera Fund, Opera America has given out over almost $13 million in funds to help the development aspect of new work, both in workshops, orchestral readings, copying work, and then also on alternate years in the marketing plans for those companies who are trying to introduce their audience to new work. So as far as the history of North American work, in the calendar years 2010 and 11, Opera America member companies were involved with 61 world premieres. Since 1900, 825 new operatic works, this is going through to 2011, had been produced by professional opera companies in North America. So we'll use 800 as our round number. Of that, 359 new operatic works have been produced since the year 2000. More than half. And that tells you that that was the missing piece, was making sure that A, companies had the funding to actually be able to develop and produce it. And once they did, that their audiences started to clamor for it. Because the surge in writing and developing new work, to have more than doubled what happened in the previous century in the last 20 years, not even, in the last 10 years, is sort of remarkable.
You know, I think one of some really basic things have changed where producers are too. First of all, we had to get over world premiere-itis. That if you didn't have the world premiere, that we're going to be unsuccessful. Well, why would any press want to come? And we forget that, you know, Verdi had 10 theaters lined up before he did the first thing. Butterfly wasn't exactly a hit when it happened, or Carmen. They got to work on it. They got to tinker with it. And it was true of me too. And also, it was at an Opera America conference. 2 big lessons I learned about 10 years ago was get over world premiere-itis, and then Daniel Catan stepped up. He has since passed away. And he said, why are you opera companies planning 5 years in a row? Why don't you have, like, in 2 years, a wild card spot where if something brilliant like Silent Night comes up, it can enter the repertory real fast? He said, right now I did Il Postino last night, and there's no plans to do it for 6 years. Why? And so immediately when Silent Night wasn't on our docket, I saw it and I changed my repertoire so I could do it within the next 18 months. It's entering the repertoire. Dead Men Walking. We have as companies, and I'm now seeing places like San Francisco and Houston, not programming 5 years in advance, but leaving space for these great pieces to bloom and to grow.
I'm just going to backtrack a little bit because I think that not only in the opera profession, but I think that Carleen, academia is a great place to do this because we have less to lose.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so much to gain. And I think that composers are seeing that. I think that I know that when I was at IU, Bob Ward had sent out Roman Fever to everybody in the world, and Jim Lucas threw it at me, and we did it. But I think that we are uniquely positioned where we don't lose so much. We're not so much worried about butts and seats, as it were, and oftentimes Little Women. It's perfect for our setting with too many sopranos.
Yeah. Bless your hearts.
Bless your hearts. So what do you think about that?
Well, no, I agree, and it's interesting that you said that, because what I was thinking is it made me recall when I was doing my dissertation, I did sort of a history of opera training in the United States, and if you go back into the 40s, after World War II, when the GI Bill was created, there was this huge proliferation of music schools that opened. There's almost, I think in a 5-year period, perhaps over 300 music schools across the country. Don't have my numbers completely in my head. But, and with that, all of these opera workshops were created. And what interesting was that was when all the one acts that we all know and love and dread so well, from that period, were all created in that venue. And so and I know that we're part of NOA, the National Opera Association, and that's been going on. They have a new works competition. And there are a lot of things that have been born out of that, but it just seems that there has been a real seismic shift in the last, 10 years especially. And it's exciting. And again, the new works that were new in the 40s, I mean, they're wonderful, but they're not perhaps all as relevant today as, I mean, I've done Old Maid the Thief. It's lovely, but I don't need to do it anymore, right? And,
I don't even want to hear the aria.
Yeah, and so to me that if we can, one beautiful thing about this prize is that we have an excuse to do this on a regular basis and add something new to the canon with each inception.
Right, I think so too, and I think that it allows us in academia to deal with subjects now, to deal with not that any great piece cannot be a metaphor, and we can't relate to it, but it's so interesting to tell the stories that we're interested in now, and not just your age, but our age, and our age now as opposed to our age 10 years ago. And
well, and I'm just thinking about, how many operas have, I've been thinking about this a lot, how many operas that we know have a beautiful aria for a gay man in it? That's a beautiful aria. There must be a couple, but I can't think of any. I don't know if Harvey Milk has anything.
3 December's the
Okay,
thing of Act
but
Two.
this is rare. This is rare. That's
I was going to say, Slippery Libra.
Okay.
Perfect argument.
But you know what I mean? Though, but a sincere and beautiful. It was very moving that any character, any person could relate to that aria. It has nothing to do with gender, and so I just love anyway that.
it's our show, Carleen.
But anyway, that was a beautiful gift, I think, to be able to explore in an academics, especially
and not just his, but this relationship that is so prevalent among us, and not just between a gay man and a heterosexual woman, but between friends.
Yes. But I think, you bring up a really interesting point, and I was thinking a lot about this before coming here, about what is relevant versus what is recognizable. And, the Marriage of Figaro is relevant. There's a lot of great pieces that are, the master works of the repertoire that are relevant, but a lot of relevance has to do with the perception of the audience for whom you're performing at any given time. I think that's a really important thing for us to keep in mind. And so when we're talking about works like we saw last night that are dealing, with the last piece that dealing with the AIDS crisis in the 80s, that is a different type of relevance, and the way in which that will resonate with audience members, like some of us who lived through that in New York City at that time, versus an audience of 20-year-olds, is very different, but it's still of a different period than when Marriage of Figaro was written. And so that's why doing this new work is so important, and keeping the churn, keeping the engagement with subject matter that speaks to people on their own terms. I think what, Mark Adamo said something to me when he was heading the Vox workshop at New York City Opera, that he would often get pieces that would be sort of, glosses of a different era, that would evoke, oh, this is a wonderful piece, but in technical terms, that it would, sound like a 21st century version of Rosenkavalier or something, and I think what's exciting now is that we are not trying to write pieces that sound like something of a different time and place. We are very happy to embrace where we are now and to just write for today. And if these pieces, there was a question that came up this morning, are you thinking about, will this piece last for 20 years or 50 years or 100 years? Who cares? We care, but that's not why you're writing them. You're writing them for the audience now. And we write these pieces so we can have a visceral experience in the theater now. And some pieces will live on. Some pieces will live on and have a very different type of impact to people in the future. But we have no control over that. So why worry about it?
Well, I think, interestingly, the idea of access and being able to access music in a different way now than we did even 10 years ago, from a student perspective, doing new work allows you to access your musical training in a different way, because you can actually ask a composer questions that you have while you're learning the score. So you might have been studying the score and you're thinking, I wonder if I can take that part out of tempo, or if that has to be really strict. And if you know that you can email that composer, then it makes you have even more questions, which makes it a more rich experience. And I think you can take that back then to Mozart and Rossini and Puccini and say, in your own head, what did Puccini want of me right here? And for some students, that's the way you get there, is through the new music. And you realize, oh, I'm supposed to be applying this to everything that I do as an artist. And I think it can really break open the experience. But then the other part of access is the fact that as composers, you can reach so many people by putting PDFs on your website and sound clips. And the fact that these performances tonight are streaming people always talk about it's easy to get a first performance. It's really hard to get a second, third, fourth, and fifth. But so many more people can see your first performance now as that it can have legs in a different way. And young singers can hear that great aria, of last night or whatever piece it is and say, I want to sing that in my audition for Opera Studio next semester. And they have the ability to Google the composer, email the composer, and say, is there any way I can get an excerpt of that? And start a whole new relationship. So I think the way that has changed is just so interesting.
I just want to add to that, and I think that's incredibly true, but I think we can do more in the field with that, especially with excerpts, because there's still a restrictive access, especially with publishers, when it comes to, and I have many friends who are publishers and work in publishing, so it's a challenge. We want to be able to provide access. It's great. You guys should have access to excerpts, just to arias. I know Shermer put an album of Daniel Catan arias out during National Opera Week, and I hope you all had a chance to download those because they were free and they're a great opportunity to get this music in your hands. But I think as a field, we can do more about that. I mean, the restrictions with the unions on live streams and broadcasts, I know you don't have quite those restrictions in an academic setting, and I think that actually may be one of the advantages, or one of the things that the academic environment can offer the field as a whole is that the distribution that professional companies actually have some real challenges with sometimes.
And I know we're all starting to work some of those challenges out, but one of the other things to address what you just were talking about, Larry, Schott Publishing realized about 8-9 years ago that there was this need out there for arias, for scenes from these new pieces, that was what was going to get traction and access for their composers and librettists' work, rather than trying to put the full score out there and sell it for $125. Because if you haven't had a chance to see it, or you've only heard a snippet of it because you saw a premiere, again at that one performance and it's not going to be produced again, how do you know you want to do it? And I have a question for the whole panel in a second related to this. But they did an interesting thing. It's called Schott NYC, and they basically gave access to their composers that was a backdoor web access to say, we don't have the resources to break this down, but if you want to excerpt an aria from, say, Doug Cuomo's piece, Doubt, and go ahead and post it as a single sheet music that can be sold and downloaded by itself, then if you go ahead and lay it out, we'll put it out there. And they've started doing that with huge collections of their music for that very reason. They've also started to try to reach out to people at academic institutions and sort of demystify this idea that publishers are, really vicious gatekeepers with three-headed dogs that will never let you get at their music. That they want these things to be put out there, that they will work with, in fact, academic institutions, conservatories, and small companies to make it accessible for you, whether it's working with you financially or working with collaborative things to make it be in your hands. Now, for those of us who have spent good portions of our lives, we'll never get back listening to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of auditions. Here are our auditionees in front of us, and, when you were saying, I don't even want to hear the aria anymore from Old Maid and the Thief. How much do you gravitate when you get a rep list, and they've just come out and sung Sempre Libera, like all good boys do, and then you go, what's next on the list? And you see the thing that's from an opera written by Jake Heggie, or an opera written by Carla Floyd, or an opera written by David Little, and you think, I'm going to ask for that because I want to see what they do with it, and singing in their own language in their own time. How many of you,
I require, for ALT, I've always required people to sing in English and, post-World War II. I'm actually now requiring 21st century as opposed to post-World War II. But even with Opera Saratoga for the Young Artist Program, this is my first year as general director, but I require, when they do live auditions, they have to bring 5 arias, and one of them must be post-World War II in English. But I specifically say in their audition letter, I would encourage you to bring something that shows your ability with musically complex language and that shows your dramatic ability. Because there are, people read post-World War II and will bring,
Unless the winter comes.
Yeah.
Or Tonight from West Side Story, which is lovely, but it's not
It's not going to show you.
It's not going to show me what I need to see. So.
I just think that, having something from the 21st century tells me a lot about you as an artist, and I'll give you a really good example. A singer came to sing for me right after Moby Dick had been premiered, and he sang the Greenhorn's aria. And I said to this kid, who I immediately hired after that, I know that's not published, how'd you get that? And he said, I saw a YouTube video of Stephen Costello singing it, and I wrote to Jake Heggie, and I said, this aria is so moving to me. I went and bought the score from Jake Heggie's website. I wrote him and said, can you tell me what you were thinking about when you wrote that? I'd love to sing that as an audition aria. That told me so much about that artist's work ethic that I knew that I was going to get the work out of him that I wanted to, and I got to hear a beautiful piece of music that is relevant to my time and my life. I like Larry, for Fort Worth Opera, if you don't come with, and Here I Stand and No Word from Tom, gloriously beautiful arias, they don't count as an English aria anymore to me. It needs to be from now. And there are a host of fantastic composers out there that you've got this wonderful thing called the internet that didn't exist when we were starting. You can find these composers. Ask Christopher, or Matt or anybody, do you have an aria that you'd like to get out there? Because fossils like me aren't going to hear that music that run opera companies unless you come in and audition with it. And then we can say, oh my God, that's really great. What's it from? It calls a dialogue to happen.
But you bring a really interesting point up, because when I was singing and doing this audition circuit, I was always told not to sing certain things because they weren't well known. Right. And I was a character tenor, and the best thing I sang was the Magician's aria from the console. And I loved to sing that auditions, and everyone was like, don't sing that, and I would always go in and sing it, and when I would sing it, I would get work. Yeah. And when I listened to people and didn't sing it, I would sing a really lousy version of Barbara Seville, and I wouldn't get the job, and I'd wonder why. And so I think that our mindset in the field has changed in that I'm intrigued when especially someone like myself who works in new music, if someone brings an aria that I don't know, it does make me listen in a different way. I'm not just listening to I never just listen to the voice, but if someone brings an aria from Bohème, there's certain types of things I'm listening to, which I do listen to a singer differently. I have to, when it's a piece that I don't know. But I think we're all more receptive to that now than perhaps 10 or 20 years ago.
And if they don't want it, they won't ask for it.
How many of you are required to have a piece that you learn as part of any of your curriculum that is from the 21st century at this point? Is it a requirement for any? This is another one of those things that I find really interesting that we all need to help elicit as a change in our academic structure. And you're looking at a panel full of people who are fighting fiercely to make those changes. But I feel that, it's exactly what Melissa was just talking about. If you have the opportunity to learn a piece and look at it and go, that really speaks to me, I can communicate with the composer, I can communicate with the librettist, that gives you the opportunity to go out there and really act. I want to see who you are. If anything has happened in contemporary performance of this repertoire and this medium, it's that the singing actor is most prized. You have to really be able to tell that story. And in doing so, it has to resonate with you. The easiest way to do that, not that it's not important for us to understand the classics and learn to speak all of those languages that most of this rep is performed in. But if you are able to sing and tell me who this character is so that I go on the journey with you in our language, it makes it that much easier for me to believe you can do that in French, Italian, or German. And it informs the way you go back and learn the repertoire. I can't encourage studying all that enough.
Well, and also, I hope that everyone who's been a part of this weekend really becomes an evangelist for new music. But with that comes a responsibility, and you have to be prepared when you bring a new music aria into an audition, that you have to know that you probably know way more about that piece than the people who are going to be listening. So you have to be prepared to talk a little bit about it. No one, in general, people are not going to say, oh, what's going on with this quando men vogue?
If they do, there's a real problem.
Right.
I don't have those people that run companies. Yeah, it's great. Just kidding.
If there's an 8-minute audition slot, they're not going to ask you those kind of questions. Those are like masterclass kind of questions where we're trying to figure out where you're at with this piece. In an audition setting, someone might say to you, what's this piece from Flight like? And you have to say, it has a lot of coloratura in it. It's about 6 minutes long. It's comparable to blank. Because then they'll know if they want to hear it or not. They don't necessarily need to get a character summary right then, but musically they want to know what they're going to be hearing in the next 4 minutes. So you really have to be prepared to give them that information and like I said, to evangelize for this music you really believe in.
Absolutely. The other aspect of this that I would love to have Larry address a little bit, and Darren, because both of you I know deal with this, but Larry in particular, in talking about higher education's role in new music, which is where we started with this question in charge from Carleen, is the development of the composer and learning and having the opportunity to learn to write for the voice. In that very particular and idiomatic way that we sing and produce in this country, which is not necessarily exactly like the European style.
Well, there's something I think, there's definitely a differentiation between writing for the voice and writing for the stage, because you can be a brilliant composer for the voice and not be a theatrical composer. So I'm going to answer your question specifically about the voice, which does not apply to writing opera necessarily. I think the best thing for composers to do is work with a lot of singers, quite frankly. There are a lot of things that can be construed as challenging, I don't want to say bad, but challenging writing for the voice. And I don't like the idea that we say something, you can't do that as a composer, because that's how things advance over time. You know, the virtuoso writing the bel canto was because, you know, those singers rose to the occasion, or those pieces were written because those singers could do it, and also because of the preferences of the audience of that time. It was actually a somewhat market-driven factor, you know. So I think that the more that, to answer your question more directly, the more that composers can work directly with singers and play and sit in on voice lessons and listen to what the challenges are of, oh, I have you in your passaggio for 6 minutes. That's tiring, you know. I mean, if they've never sung before, they don't know that, you know. And it doesn't mean that they can't do it. And that's the thing I always say. It's like, if you want to write a 19-minute aria for a tenor that lies on F sharp and G, well, you can do that. If you know that what you're asking the tenor to do, if you know that there aren't going to be a lot that can do it, and that it may not sound very pretty, you know, but there will be one or two. There will be a Peter Tansett who can sing anything, you know. Or
I hope he lives forever.
Exactly, you know. There are those, but the opportunity to work also with singers as diverse as possible, and not a lot of what I found is a lot of composers fall in love with certain singers. There's a singer in New York, Carleen, who every composer on the planet loves. And
Producers too.
Producers too. We all hire her because she can sing anything, and she's got a gorgeous voice, and she's, you know, the most wonderful person to work with.
Theatrical.
Yeah, theatrical. But so yes, you want to be able to work with someone like that, but you also want to work with someone who may not have as many natural prodigious gifts, because not every soprano on the planet has that facility, and you want your work to be performable.
And from a singer standpoint, that's where I started. Well, Larry did too. But when I was a junior in college, Craig Baumler was a graduate student, and I asked him if he had a song cycle, and he said, "I'll write you one." So I premiered Craig Baumler's song cycle at my senior recital. 10 beautiful songs that has just been sung. It's still being sung by singers around. He's having a world premiere at Arizona Opera next year based on Riders of the Purple Sage. He's a great composer. He was a student. You know, Dan's sitting right there. Get him to write you something, and then perform it. You know, and then you perform it together. Craig actually was not my pianist, but he played those on my recital, and it was wonderful to make music with a composer and to be the first person to ever sing those songs. It was really exciting. You need to sort of just jump to that next logical conclusion of collaboration with the people that are right around you.
We were sort of already dipping into this, but among the emerging artists, and you have mentioned some more established artists that you know and observe, or with whom you've worked, what qualities or skills best support their ability to thrive in today's profession, and how does their ability and willingness to participate in new works factor into this scenario?
I have more stats. You're not going to like these. This is when we came up with this survey, which was prompted by this gentleman, and we were shocked that nobody had actually done this study. We're going to do a much more in-depth study to get deeper numbers. But it was a short survey on the artist training programs in the country, and when I came back with this information to the first group of students we reported it to. I had one of them look at me and go, "You just dropped a truth bomb." We surveyed 12 summer festivals that responded in terms of the summer festival programs. So something that would probably be ideal for many of you to audition for while you're in school. With the idea that we wanted to know how many applications they received versus the number of positions that were actually available. So how many jobs are really out there while you're an emerging singer? There were 5,622 applications received by those 12 programs. There were 302 jobs available. That is a 5.37% acceptance rate. It is easier to get into Stanford or Yale than it is to get a job as a working singer at a summer festival, based on those percentages. It is a tough thing to do. More and more, you need to be the quadruple threat, as I refer to it now. You need to know the repertoire, you have to sing, you have to act and move, and you need to be aware of and able to be really fluid in our language, meaning those of you who sing and work in the US in English, and the language of new music. Take every opportunity you can to start to get to know that. There are whole careers that can actually, and people who I know who have whole careers because they're really viciously good sight readers, and they go in and they work on new music readings for composers and librettists and people who are developing new work, both in this genre that's starting to blend more and more, which is the opera-musical/theater, or I can't remember where the slashes go in there, it's all blending now. But we're seeing it cross over in style more. If you're going to make a differentiation between opera and musical theater, we've even started to eliminate the differentiation of the unamplified voice. Because a great deal of new opera actually is including sound design and amplification as part of what they're doing in the composition to texturally paint the piece. And it resonates with what we're doing in society. I look at Two Boys. I look at things like even Dark Sisters, to a certain extent. Another piece that has lots of women and one baritone. Accessible. And a topical issue written about what was happening with the fundamentalist LDS church in Texas. So it is essential, I think, as you have this opportunity while you're in school, be like a sponge. Suck up as much of everything as you can, and that includes working with, you've got composers on your faculty who would probably be happy to write things for you because Dan's about to be too busy writing for everybody else, since he's now been promoted.
Jonathan's back there.
And Jonathan, yes, exactly. Talk to those colleagues. See if there's something you want to do with them, but also find other pieces that are out there that are getting developed. Talk to these 3 composers that were just here and see if they've got something else. We did a thing when we opened the National Opera Center 2 years ago to show that it's not crazy to just commission a song to commemorate something. What we did was crazy because I sent out invitations to 70 composers and 50 of them said yes. So I had to make a songbook with 50 songs in it. But it's a fantastic songbook. The 3 of the songs Mark Campbell wrote the text for. There are multiple pieces in there. There are faculty I know from around the country that are having their students work their way through that. They're songs, they are written by everybody from Robert Ward to Kevin Putz, who won the Pulitzer Prize for Silent Night, to David Little. It's make yourselves as familiar as you can be with it. Because it's your language. It's your musical voice in our time.
Can I take a step back from what I agree with everything you're saying, but the stats are sobering, and they were very sobering to me this year. We're going through the Opera Saratoga numbers. We had 1,031 applicants for 20 singer positions, which is almost a 2% acceptance rate. And now the pre-screening is by Yak Tracker, which I'm sure you all know about. So I want to go just to something which has nothing to do with contemporary opera whatsoever. It just has to do with the young singers. Get someone to listen to your recordings. Because if you're recording, first of all, if you're not singing in tune, or the quality of the recording is bad, when I have to listen to 1,000 recordings of Darren, That's it. It's next, and it's a really horrible thing to say. And we know you paid your application fee and all that shit, but you know, I was shocked by the number of young singers who just aren't putting their best foot forward at that first stage. And there were probably singers who, if they got past the first stage and got into an in-person audition, would make a much more favorable impression. So take some time to get with people you trust and have them listen to your materials, because that's your first access point.
Which means you can't do your recordings the night before they're due.
On your iPhone.
On your iPhone, yeah. And so that's the thing. And this is an investment. It's an expense of time, of money, and so it needs to happen. You have to be very well planned, and usually plan for at least 2 recording sessions. One to do it, to see what you sound like in a recording and to analyze it, and then a retake so that you can get what you want and have a selection of what you want.
I also run Siegel Music Colony, which is a young artist training program. And we used to, when I first got there, I was really focused on graduate students and repertoire. But the more I realized that the sooner we get you, the more we can help you. So we now take singers as young as 19, because you have to complete a strategic plan while you're at Siegel Colony. So you have to give me your next 5 years. If we know that your next 5 years is 2 more years of undergraduate, 2 years of graduate school, we can really prepare you for that first audition year out there. Planning, as Carleen just said, it's just so necessary. You need to really sort of map out what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, what experience is going to be right for you at what time, whether it's the Fall Festival here, or whether it's Siegel Music Colony or Brevard, or that planning process, from making your recordings to filling out the application, tells us a world about you before we even see you.
You know, I back to the singer and new music thing. I think that for a long time, there was, you know, one person in the school who had perfect pitch and could count, and they were your new music singer, you know, and they always did some like weird concert of composer new works. And what I love about what's happening now,
George Crumb.
yeah, exactly, like ancient voices of children, you know.
Right.
I remember hearing that here in a classroom right over there, and my mind was blown, you know. But it's not as segmented as it used to be. You can do a piece like that on a recital with a bunch of other older works. And I think that from a vocal technique standpoint, it's important that, especially at the undergraduate level, which is what this mainly is that you're really, really working on your vocal technique in your lessons. And that if you are deciding to become a new music singer, it doesn't mean that you don't sing with a healthy classical technique. And it doesn't mean that composers are not going to write things that you can sing with your healthy whole voice. So I think it's so important that young singers aren't saying, oh, I'm just going to make a decision that I don't do this Puccini. You know, I can't figure that out, so I'm going to do this thing that's a little bit easier. In undergrad especially, it's your time to challenge yourself. And the point of, for me at least, one of the points of having a solid vocal technique is so that it serves your artistry. So that you can do more and express more of what you have inside to get it outside and communicate it to the audience. Because when you are singing with a very clear technique and a very clear intention, then we get so much more of what you're doing, and we get so much more of the work that you're trying to communicate to us.
I just want to say something about the technique, because I think the word opera has become one of the most abused words. It's going to be one of my next blog posts, I have to tell you. No, but I think that there are a lot of things being called opera, and I don't mean the opera music theater debate. I think there are a lot of things out there that are being called opera, which are really interesting performance forms. But I know, speaking for myself, I would speak for Darren, which I try not to do too often, but I think I know this is true, that what most opera companies that are producing in a quasi-traditional model are looking for in new work are works that still embrace the expressive potential of the classically trained voice. Yes. Whether or not it is amplified or unamplified or, you know, sung through a vacuum hose, it's still about having something. The core technique needs to be there. And so, to your point, I think it's really key, is that if you can't skip that step and say, I want to be a new music singer. It's just not an option.
No. I think so much of what is actually successful in the contemporary canon are pieces that do exactly what Larry just said. They are pieces like Glory Denied, which the vocal demands of that piece on the 4 singers who sing it are just as intense as it would be for those 4 singers to do Bohème or do Così. It's just that it happens to be telling a contemporary story about the longest held Vietnam prisoner and what happens when you lose 9 years of your life and there's massive pivotal change in your home country. Definitely resonant with the singers in it, but my gosh, that score was demanding. And it was demanding on the instrumentalists as well, and the people who were playing it. I think that, we're talking about this in front of all of the singers in the room, and do we have any instrumentalists here? They're probably playing something somewhere. They have to practice way more than you guys. Well, you can't wear the voice out the way you can the violin, let's be honest. But even in terms of talking to friends of mine who are instrumentalists and what the demands are in terms of playing contemporary opera, they say it's exactly like any of the other long forms. There's a level of focus and artistry that is involved in it in an ensemble mode that is very different than being a solo instrumentalist, and also contributing to the storytelling with the music that they are making. Individually, the whole sound helps support and make what you all do, be the rising tide that lifts all the boats to a transcendent experience.
I'm going to shift a little bit here and draw from something that Darren drew my attention to very recently, in fact this month. CMS, the College Music Society, just released a study. It's called Transforming Music Study from Its Foundations. I know Copeland's just getting ready. He just can't wait. Transforming Music Study from Its Foundations, a manifesto for progressive change in the undergraduate preparation of music majors. And it was a task force that was initiated by Patricia Sheehan Campbell of the University of Washington, who was the convener and the president of the College Music Society. And it's very interesting because it addresses I'm tying this into the previous question as what do singers need to be able to do and understand and know in order to thrive today. And so I think we can broaden that up. And how do we address that academically so that when they go out, they are prepared? Copeland, you want to start?
I don't know. I think I have more questions than answers. I certainly have some answers, but I would like to hear from Larry and from Darren and Laura Lee. What do you see missing most? What makes you turn off from a singer initially when they're auditioning for you?
Wow. I find that there are so many people graduating without the most basic of skills. And I'll say this in my master class later today. I know within 3 or 4 notes whether or not your voice speaks to me, whether I like your voice. After that, it is up to you to keep me entertained. Are your languages perfect? If you're singing Mozart, what is your Mozart style like? Are you telling me a story? Is there movement involved? It's a 9-minute job interview. It's a 9-minute job interview. I find there is, one day I heard a whole day of auditions in New York City, and I wrote on my Facebook page, when did singing in tune go out of style?
Oh, yeah.
Really, basic singing in tune. It doesn't help if you can be the color green if you can't carry a lantern across the stage and sing in tune. I just find it, as Melissa was saying, some of the most basic things are skipped in order to get to that next step. It doesn't help me if you are singing Sempre Libera if you can't sing it in tune and you can't communicate what what Violetta is trying to say to me. So you have to attend to all of it. You have to do something that 1% of the world can do. And with that great gift that the universe has given you comes an enormous responsibility. And nothing makes me madder than someone with a glorious instrument that has just shirked all the work. Do the work.
Yeah. I think that the basic technical soundness of your vocal production is a non-negotiable. And I was joking with Lori Rogers, who is our director of the Young Artist Program, with all the mezzos who apply, and they start with chocolat, and you hear va, and in 3 seconds you know whether or not you like the voice from va, you know, and you do know whether or not you like the voice.
That's a soprano.
Exactly, you can tell temporally if the voice is going to be of interest to you, but I'll say there are singers whose voices on first listening may not be the ones that I go, oh God, this is the next Nikolai Gedda, or something that an instrument that I'm really intrigued with. But there's something else about them that hooks, and that's what I think is something that beyond the technique is really crucial. For me, it's a connection to text, and it's a relationship with the text that makes a singer exciting, because that's the core to any acting ability. I know that there's movement for actors and all that sort of stuff. Forget it. If you don't have a true personal relationship and interaction with the text, you will never be a good actor. And that's whether it's something which is, even a tough piece like yours last night, which is fairly minimal in terms of the text setting, or something that is more verbose, the text is at the core of it. And so if you are not someone who is naturally, literarily inclined or poetically inclined, that's something that I think you need to, and you're not getting that in your classes, you need to find a way to get that into your life, essentially. And in terms of how curriculum can, curiosity is it's a basic requirement, but I do wonder what curriculum could be developed to, and I don't have the answer to that, but to create a better relationship between the text and the singer. And it's not even necessarily about while singing.
No, no. In fact, it's before you sing, before you breathe.
Yeah.
Actually, you have to have that literal inspiration before you take in the air to say what you're going to say. But I couldn't agree more. I think that I would like to say before the technique or other than the technique, I think that is part of the problem, is that for so long in academia, we have not tied acting training as technique. It's been an extra.
Yeah.
I don't know how many students wait until the day before Nats to come and knock on my door and say, oh, I want to sing this song for you that I've been working on for 2 years. Now what are we going to do? Right? And they come in with a blank slate. And it has to be personal. You have to find some way in there. Sorry, my mind's like wandering. This happens when you get old. Why are you singing this song? And it can be because I like it. But then have the curiosity, the artistic integrity and the artistic curiosity to find out why you like it. It could just be because of that Neapolitan sixth chord to begin with, but why? How does it attach to the text? How do we find out why we're saying? Whom do we want to change with what we're saying? Because when you find out whom you want to change with what you're saying and how you want them to change, you will change the judge who listens to you. You will change the other part, the forgotten part of our ensemble, the audience. All of us put ourselves in that ersatz person. And we're changed by it. And I think that the curriculum that we need to have acting. It needs to be a core curriculum. We need to have languages, and we have to have some type of synthesis with all of them. Because it's all well and good, but how many times do you go to theory, and then you walk out and you go, boy, I passed that test, and you never think about, how am I going to apply this to the song that I'm learning? We compartmentalize education.
Yes, somebody must say.
Well, we do, and I'm at Lawrence now. I just took a job as Director of Opera Studies at Lawrence Conservatory, Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin. And I am so lucky because the Dean, the Provost, the President, and the faculty support a holistic learning experience. We are trying to change education and how we educate not only singers but musicians, and how we communicate and bring in improvisation into all aspects of music and composition, exactly. So that this compartmentalization will stop, because that's not how artists work. We do have to perfect these various techniques, but then we have to find some way to synthesize it into communication. Period. It's the only reason we talk, is to try to get someone outside of us to see the world the way we see it. Period.
I'm going to add to both of what you said in that I will throw a challenge down to schools and to the students in that I hear and see people audition all the time who have vocal performance degrees and they've not performed.
Right.
Yes.
And I know that it's easy as a student to sit back and be mad and be like, well, the opera director doesn't like me, or my teacher's not favored and they're not political, so we don't get the roles. If that happens, you need to seek out those opportunities. And you need to create those opportunities for yourself. So if you don't get into the top tier young artist programs, but if you really want to be a performer, then you need to go find a place that will hire you to perform. So the first time that you perform an aria, really, really embody and perform an aria, should not be at your first audition of the year. If you need to be setting up mock auditions with your peers, do it. And I will throw down that challenge to schools that are granting degrees in vocal performance. You need to make sure that you are creating opportunities for your students to perform.
Amen. Yes.
I think that every single time you stand up and take a breath and are going to do anything, it's a performance. Period. You need to have performance energy every single time you communicate.
I always think about the word actionable. This comes from actually my business classes and marketing research, but I think it actually applies to students and to teachers. Is that what are you learning in your classes that is actionable to your performing career? And so, in terms of curriculum development, the challenge I think that we need to lay down is, can you design a curriculum where every element of that curriculum is actionable to the student's future performing life? And for students, if you're in a class and you don't, I can remember being in harmony class when I was an undergrad music student and just praying for it to be over because I was a voice student. And it wasn't where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in the opera workshop class. And I wish I had had the guts to say, in a non-confrontational way, but, because you don't want to come across as aggressive, but, it's like, I know I have to take this class as a required class, but how is this going to, you don't want to say, how is this going to help me? But that's the intent of what you want to say. How can I use this? I'm sitting in this class, I want to know, how can I use these particular tools that you're giving me? How can I apply that to what I want to do as a performer? And I would challenge students to be a little bit bold. And if you are in a class where you don't understand why you're there, pull your teacher aside and in a really respectful way, ask. Yes. And ask them, and if they can't give you an answer, then challenge them. Say, look, I have to be here, and I really want to get the most out of it. Help me get the most out of it, because this is what I'm planning on doing. How can you help me get the most out of this experience, since I have to sit here for 4 hours a week?
I'm going to play slight devil's advocate in the midst of all this, because this particular crowd of us is clearly, leading the groundswell and kicking the dirt to try to change academia in front of all of you students who are like, oh, okay, but I'm taking these classes and I'm here. Listen.
Revolt.
Yes, but listen.
Not here. This is a great place.
62% of the people who go into medical school have bachelor's degrees in music.
Yep.
There is great quality and validity to the degree you're pursuing, just as it is at this moment. Yes, there needs to be change. And as we have all acknowledged, the glacial pace at which change is usually evoked in the universities because of our structure, it probably won't happen until well after you've graduated, but we need to start some of those changes. But there is incredible value. From the beginning of time, before people had figured out that they could take sheep's guts and string them across a box and make noise, this was what we communicated with. It's exactly what Copeland was saying. The voice, the human voice, was the thing that could communicate, that could evoke emotion, and that could change the world. As students, if you're going to go out there and do this, that's the instrument you've been given to do that with. Learn everything you can to make that be effective. Don't just settle for, oh, I have a throat touched by God. Exactly what Darren said, don't be lazy. We'll smack you if you're lazy. You're the singers that drive us crazy. But you have the ability to do so many things. And not everyone in this room who is a performance major will perform for the rest of their lives. You're looking at 5 people who all started as performers, 6 who started as performers of some kind, and look where we are now. So, but take all of this knowledge and absorb as much of it as you can and start applying it right away. What Melissa said. Sing for each other. Get 3 singers together and buy pizza for the pianist and do auditions for each other. And be honest with each other. That's a skill set of learning how to critique what you're hearing in your friends. Use your theory and your history and your study of the piece to go, I don't believe for a second you're in love with Rodolfo. Sing that again. Because that also makes you better artists and better colleagues.
And I will say, honestly, I was not born with a Steinway in my throat. I had a perfectly good upright Yamaha in there, right? But I worked so hard that I worked a lot more, and perhaps much more, than the people that were born with Steinways. I had to work harder. I had to be more curious. I had to be that guy to beat. And so you might not have the most perfect instrument. You can still craft a really excellent career by hard work.
Yes,
absolutely.
You know, it brought up, I'm not backtracking a bit, but it reminded me, and I think I can share this because these colleagues are no longer here. So I'll talk about them behind their backs.
It's
on video, hi. But I went into the mailroom one day, and this was many years ago. I went into the mailroom, and a wonderful colleague of mine who I adore, who's no longer working here, he came in and he goes, oh my God, why can't he just got out of chorus rehearsal. I was like, oh, why can't my choir sight read? They can't sight read. And one of our other colleagues in another department said, well, and he looked at the colleague and said, why can't they sight read? And this was a person who was teaching sight singing. And the teacher said, well, because their voice teacher isn't teaching them. And it was really talking about the compartmentalization of it. And I'm not blaming, I'm sure the voice teacher's thinking, well, they should learn how to sight sing in chorus. So, it sort of is a vicious cycle. But it goes to this idea of everything that we're doing are these, like, we're all in these little mini silos. And it's very challenging, I think, because faculty, we get very passionate about what we're interested in, and there's probably an easy way to be threatened if we have to collaborate, and we lose that. I don't know. It's a very delicate situation in academia because we hire all specialists, and it's important to be really super wonderful at what you do. You want to be an expert. But then with that comes sort of this inability to fully understand other avenues that are closely related, just for lack of time, if nothing else. Copeland, do you see that?
I do see it, but I think that, and I don't mean to pat ourselves on the backs, but opera is an amalgam. Opera is an amazing, scary mix of everything. Every single discipline in art. And so I think that we see that. So it's easier for us, and who knows, chicken or egg, what drew us to it, or whether it's what we learned. But I think that the more that we can dispel fear, possibly in the other disciplinary areas, that may help. That's what I try to do. I really try to go and have a personal relationship with people, because that's just who I am. But because I love hearing other people's views. But we have to work together. We have to work together.
This is not something that is accomplished by one person,
No.
Nor is a person's education.
No.
A person's education is the result of the investment of many people.
Right.
Yeah,
including you yourselves.
Yes.
And not just by being in classes, but Larry is exactly right.
Exactly.
And I didn't learn that lesson until I was in my second grad school, that I was the consumer. And I wasn't mean about it. I just said, what am I going to get from this class? I know how to read a score, I know my languages, and I know the rep. And the teacher, who will remain nameless, said, you're not going to learn anything in this because I'm just training stage managers. And I said, that's great. is it okay if I go and take all of my classes in the theater department and have them count toward my degree? And he said, I think that would be the best idea. And I did, and I crafted out what I did. But if I had not asked that question, if I had sat in and been mad and been resentful through that entire class, not only would I not have gotten anything, I would have gotten something horrible on top of it. Yes?
I just want to address what you said, Carleen. I think that, and I look at universities across the country, and the thing that makes me the most upset is the siloing of everything, and everybody sort of like protecting their own territory. And so, when you're allowed to build your own perfect school, which I consider the Siegel Music College, it's a training program, I only hire people that are extraordinarily collaborative. And it is very likely that Steve Lussman will say, wow, we've been chasing that around for a while. Why don't you go to Jen Elmer? She's really good at French, and she can really help you shape that vowel, and then come back and let's chase it around a little bit more. Or someone saying, this coach is really better at Strauss, and so we get together at the end of the day and we say, what were their coachings like, and what can we all do to move that needle for each artist? And I think if someone did have a conversation like that and say, why can't they sight read? And a voice teacher saying, well, why don't we just take a lesson and go, here's a Strauss song, let's see what happens. Or that we all really think at the beginning of the day, what can I do to move the needle of the student this much farther, along with all the colleagues that are here. And what I love about being here these 2 days is I see so much collaboration going on. It's just not the case, and it's the most frustrating thing to me when I visit a university to see everybody just, excuse my French, pissing on their own territory.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
We had a very collaborative step, and this is getting fairly granular, but at the University of Maryland with the graduate program, we had the opera faculty and then we had the voice faculty. And we were all in auditions from the very beginning. Everybody had so many things to do, but in the middle of the first semester, it's a 2-year program, in the middle of the first semester, dead at the center of week 7.5, we ordered lunch and we had the entire opera faculty, even people who had not seen or had these first-year students in their class. And we had the voice faculty sit around a table, and we went down the list of all of the students who are in the program. And we said, tell me what's happening with them in your class. Tell me what you're seeing from them. There were things that the voice teachers learned, and there were things that the opera faculty learned that would show up in those different places about each of those students that you might not have seen. One of my favorite breakthrough moment stories was that we had this mezzo who had this amazing, just stunning instrument. Now she's singing all over. She's Paris and Germany, but she was as if somebody had she was like a deer in headlights the minute she was actually in performance mode. She was so not in her body, and nothing from the neck down connected. And the minute that we put her in stage combat class and gave her a quarterstaff, oh my God, she became a completely different person. And it was because her movement teacher in the first year said, if I make her talk while she's moving around and holding something, she suddenly frees up. And her voice teacher went, my God, I'm going to give her a yardstick to hold in her lesson. And that was the beginning of being able to help make a change for that student and use our knowledge as faculty to benefit these consumers who are trusting us for that. But I would get so frustrated, and they did the same thing, where there was an Italian specialist on the faculty, a French, somebody, Dolores would say, listen, I don't know from that French, you go talk to Gran and take 2 lessons with him, and then come, or go study with Linda, because you're going to do English, and she's the expert on English diction. It is a much more integrated process, and even as we move, and that's been going on for 25 years there, but even as we move forward, you all have the ability with the internet, with the way technology is now, to go and hunt out information that you want, and why we in education don't do the same thing in terms of being able to facilitate that and make ourselves accessible. We're starting to get behind, we on the faculty of the training institutions, we're getting behind the ball, and that's, I think, where part of this change needs to be elicited.
I want to flip the conversation a little bit and go back to what students can do themselves, because I think that what concerns me is when I see, whether it's singers or composers or anyone who's in school, allowing their education to be on autopilot. The fact is that, yes, as faculty members, we'll all talk to each other and confer, and we do genuinely have the best interest of our students at heart, but you have to have the best interest of your own education at heart 100% of the time, and you drive your own car. Yep. It's really, that's the bottom line. And I'll say that with the Composer Librettist program that I run in New York, I have learned more about how to make the program better from the discussions I've had with the people in the program than I have with the faculty. And it's not to say that the faculty hasn't helped to shape the program, but the program is there for the composers and librettists. So you all have so much more power than you probably realize to help shape your destiny. And I don't mean just for your particular moment while you're in XYZ class, but if your teachers are receptive, what you bring to them will really impact the program in the future. And I just encourage you not to be shy about it.
No, I couldn't agree more. Carleen, I mean, this is an area, and I know that you have a secret piece of paper somewhere. But this is nothing that you can do. Well, maybe you can. You can probably lobby. It's constraints of curriculum.
And it's the creep. I mean, we all talk. Faculty, we often talk about this here, and it's something that is always being discussed, and certainly we. I mean, I know if I bring this up, you'll all go off the deep end, but we do have accreditation issues that we have to address. And what I've learned though in my participation in those accreditation processes in terms of the self-evaluation and whatnot, we do. I have found that it's best to use, and I use that word very literally, to use that opportunity to get what we feel we need. And oftentimes schools just go, oh, we have to check off that box, that box, that box, and that box. And I think that the accreditation process has gotten very skewed by that. And if we would look at it from the other way and say, no, this is an opportunity. Like for instance, we used our latest. We used our health. Kirk, you can help me. The health and there's a sorry. Musculoskeletal health. Yeah, issue that was brought up, and then also the hearing health. That was the other big one. To get funding to get 2 extra large new rehearsal rooms. And we got that because we used that response on the accreditation to get that. And I think that is a positive thing because, we can use that, but oftentimes we don't see that in that process. We get bogged down because we're, at the institution level, they say, oh, we're not going to get accredited if we don't do X, Y, and Z. And I think you can use that to your advantage.
Right. I don't know how it is at SUNY, but.
No, it's not bureaucratic at all.
I didn't think so. Being a state institution, right? Not that I've ever been involved. But we're seeing more and more of a trend toward. Well, it's mainly because tuition costs so much, and we're seeing lower numbers of students, et cetera, that we are to get them out in this amount of time, matriculation, and no more than 120 hours. And I don't know about you, but for my BM in vocal performance, I clocked in like 146.
I did too. And now we're not allowed. We are not allowed.
We're not allowed.
We are not allowed.
There's a 149 state standard in Texas for undergraduate degrees.
Yeah. So I mean, again, we can't solve all the world's problems, but at least it's something of interest to think about for the future. And we do need to wrap up. But any final thoughts? Do I dare allow any final thoughts?
Listen, do the closing prayer.
Well, I was just going to say that, we've kind of taken this from new music into kind of the future of education and music and opera. And no matter where you go from here, and I'm kind of addressing the SUNY Potsdam students, just remember and hold on to the emotional impact that these musical experiences have had. So there's been so many great successes, big and small, with a project like this. And whether you were interning, or if you were the stage manager, or whatever it was, make sure that you take that time to really let that experience marinate and hold that impact with you. Because you might not end up becoming the next greatest opera star or the next greatest librettist. But if you become a lawyer, and you are working, or a teacher, whatever it is that you're doing, I hope that you hold the arts so close to you and you remember these times and that you might become the next great donor.
Amen.
And we wouldn't be sitting here this weekend if it weren't for people who had been so greatly impacted by an artistic experience that they wanted to create a legacy. And that is why we're all sitting here today. So no matter what happens in the future, please do just hold on to those moments, because that's what it's all about.
I just have to thank all of you for coming. This is a huge highlight for me, and it's invigorating, and I hope the rest of you have enjoyed it. And also at 1 o'clock, Darren will be doing in here a master class, because he has nothing to say. And,
Like my own hour.
I know, his own hour. And we hope you'll come back and go have some lunch. It's Mac and Cheese Friday, Mel Wegner. Mel Wegner wants to know if it's Mac and Cheese Friday.
Yes.
It is Mac and Cheese Friday at Crane. So anyway, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Carleen. Oh, that would be fantastic.
I'm going to have you.
That's the
I'll do it here.
Then we have to
The
get our
lights
trio.
Here, so I might also do a picture.
All right.
Do two. So we have a couple to choose from.
Oh, wait, girl.
We're all good.